And that's the biggest lesson. You can't follow the herd. And those that follow the herd and just blindly follow conventional wisdom without taking time to stop and pray and ask for guidance and direction for their world and their life, that's when mistakes happen and that's when we lose. That's when the biggest losses occur, is when we blindly follow the herd. The herd mentality is the most dangerous thing in humankind,
It is. Hey, Danielle Walker here. I'd love for you to check out my online boutique, Lux Lion. My mission for Lux Lion is to showcase innovative African designers and sustainable mission-driven brands. To do that, I bring you stunningly beautiful handcrafted jewelry and accessories from some of my absolute favorite places on earth. Small batch wholesale for storefronts is also available. Join me in celebrating African artistry and shop now at luxlion.us. Use promo code FREEDOM for an additional 10% off your purchase. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to For the Love of Freedom. Today is Wednesday, October 15th. It's 10 a.m. Central. I'm coming to you live on Voice of the People USA TV and radio network on Rumble, X, YouTube, and Facebook. After the fact, you can catch us on any of those platforms, and you can also catch us on the audio-only ones like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Well, I'm your host, Danielle Walker, and on this show, we meet people who've rejected the status quo, people who have broken with convention and broken with the belief that the TV tells them the truth. Each of my guests, in their own way, are working to bring freedom to the world. Just a small note, I thought I would be having a Nigerian evangelist on today. We tried to pre-record yesterday afternoon because I knew that the signal was going to be touch and go, and we did not have enough there to be able to bring the full episode to you today. But I'll be putting some great little clips out on social media, so keep an eye out for those. And a big thank you to my guest today for being flexible. Sean, thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am, of course.
So today's guest is one that I've been looking forward to having on the show since we met a few weeks ago through our mutual friend, a dear friend, Coach Kevin. Shout out to you, Coach. Sean is a family man who found his purpose in the midst of heartbreak. And through his professional work, this has meant working with families to build legacy and generational wealth. And personally, it's meant charting a course as the hands-on philanthropist whose heart is to love and support and be family to children who are in need. So welcome to the show, Sean.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure to have you. I love to start the show with a scripture to kind of frame things out. And the one that I chose for today, I think the Lord leads me to all these scriptures, so I don't like to say that I chose it, but it is Proverbs chapter 16, verse 20. And it says, "One skilled in business discovers prosperity, but the one who trusts in God is blessed beyond belief." And I just thought that was such a perfect scripture for you because of where our conversation is going today. Your story marries both trust in God and success in business. And even I just love the way that those two things are so intertwined to bring in what you do every single day. So I don't know if you want to maybe comment on that at all, or if you just want to see how it unfolds throughout the conversation.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect verse, it really is. And it really is. It's like you said, it's kind of the theme of what's been going on in my life and my family's life for the last over 10 years now, at least, probably 15 years now, since I finally surrendered and got out of my own way, and just trusted in him and focused on what he wanted me to do instead of what I wanted to do,
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I love it.
Awesome.
It's great.
Well, I do want to get into what you're doing now because I love all the things you're involved in. But first, let's talk about finding your identity. And you just talked about getting out of your own way. because that's absolutely essential to who you are today and what you're doing today.
Yeah. So I grew up as an athlete. I was a diver. I trained for the Olympic team. And so my whole life, I was introduced as that kid that was training for the Olympics. And that became my identity growing up. And all through college, had a great career, was on the national team, trained and competed internationally um, for the U.S. Had a wonderful time doing it. But at the very end, I did not get to compete in the Olympics like I had hoped and dreamed, and it crushed me. I lost, and like it does so many of us. I've got a lot of friends that are in the sport, even Olympic athletes, Olympic champions, lost their way after the Olympics, just losing who they were at their core, because we grow up believing the press, as I like to say. You believe your own stories, and when things don't go your way, when your worldview is disconnected from your self view, then that's when you have that internal, strife. And I think that's really when God's sitting there going, okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Just kind of sitting there waiting for you to turn to him, but, being a strong willed male, I was stubborn and just kept fighting it and fighting it. So I, didn't get to go to the Olympics, and decided that I was going to take the skill set that I had learned as an athlete at that level and apply it to business. And so I started working for Dell Computers during the heyday, when the stock was doubling and splitting every year,
Mm-hmm.
and we were becoming what they called Dellionaires overnight. And I worked a lot, worked very, very hard. We worked 60 hours a week. It was a brand new division within inside of Dell that was growing. And so there was a lot of opportunity to make a lot of money. And I took full advantage of that, and saved as much as I could. At the ripe old age of 29, I retired and sold all my stock options and became a Dellionaire. And I spent the summer just water skiing and hanging out in Austin, Texas, and having fun with friends. And got a phone call one day from a friend of mine that was starting a .com. It was back during the .com craze.
Yeah.
And they were starting a company called mall.com. And they had purchased a bunch of online domain names. It was back when domain names were selling for millions of dollars. So they bought these domain names, and they were flipping them and selling
Mm-hmm.
them and making money doing that. But they kept a few of them. And a couple of them they kept were mall.com and shops.com. And they had this idea of bringing what essentially is Amazon today to the internet back in 2000. And so we started working on that, and we did it. We built out an online shopping mall with virtually every retail company available online to shop there. What was unique about the company was we created the very first universal shopping cart technology. So you could go to J.C. Penney or J. Crew or Macy's, dump everything in one cart and check out one time. And the money we would escrow the funds
Uh-huh.
and distribute the money to the stores, and we would keep our percentage, of course.
Yeah.
And so that model, that financial model, was what was so attractive, and that attracted a bunch of venture capital companies, and we ended up getting purchased by one of them. And so here we were, a bunch of young guys sitting around with a bunch of money, didn't know what to do with it, had no financial background or expertise at all. And all of a sudden, you have a bunch of money drop into your lap. And so, what do? We don't pray about it. The first thing we do is say, hey, let's 10x our returns and roll the dice, right? Because we know what's best. And so we did that. We rolled everything up into a second company. And that was when the .com bubble burst. And we ended up losing everything. So I had gone through this, what I call a wealth cycle. I had made a bunch of money and then couldn't stabilize it, gone from scarcity to abundance, couldn't stabilize that abundance, and lost it all, right? There's a reoccurring theme here. You'll recognize it. And so, um, I got frustrated and upset. And so I hit the reboot button. I backed off and decided that at the time, after the .com bubble burst, a lot of my friends who had not lost their money, I had noticed that they had cashed out at the top of the market when the .com bubble was at the peak, and they had cashed out and put all their money into real estate, which was the next asset class that was way undervalued.
Yeah.
So they had gone from the top of one asset class to the bottom of another and just rode the real estate bubble up as it grew. And so by 2006, I kind of saw what they were doing and I jumped on their coattails and did the same thing. I started a real estate lending and investing company. We hired a bunch of people to do mortgages, and we did real estate contracts for new purchases. And then we also had a group of investors that were doing flipping real estate. And interest rates were coming down, so the market was great, so we could do both sides of the deal, the mortgage and the purchase or the refinance, and just making tons of money again. So here I was, cycling again, going back up from scarcity to abundance. And I get a phone call from a buddy of mine who's a hedge fund manager. His name's Kyle Bass. He's out of Dallas, Texas. And we reconnect. He was a diver like myself. He was at TCU while I was at SMU. And we got to be good friends through diving. And he had, after college, he had left and become a hedge fund manager with Bear Stearns. He became one of the youngest hedge fund managers in Bear Stearns history. 28 years old, and he was managing a huge portfolio. And took that wisdom and knowledge and information and everything that he learned there and started his own firm. So we reconnect in 2006, and he says, hey, I've got this new hedge fund, and we are focused on real estate, and in particular, these mortgage-backed securities. Do you remember mortgage-backed securities?
Yeah.
So he says, we've been noticing that real estate values, the price of homes, has been skyrocketing over the last 10 years, but jobs and income levels have flattened out. And it's the first time in history that those two things have disconnected or not been kind of gone up the same rate.
Yeah.
Usually the more money we make, the bigger home we buy, right? Mm-hmm. So the value of homes goes up with the amount of income we have. Well, this was the first time in history there was a dislocation. And he saw that. And so he started doing his own research, and he started asking tough questions like, what happens when people can't pay their mortgage? And he went to the rating agencies that were rating these mortgage-backed securities, and he would ask them that question, like the S&P 500 or the S&P or the Moody's, these rating agencies. And they would say things like, oh, come on, Kyle, you and I both know that real estate always goes up by 6%. It always has, and it always will. And he would push back and say, well, what if it doesn't?
Yeah.
Just asking good questions, right? Trying not to follow the herd, which is the theme here. And so they didn't have any good answers. And so he had this theory that if people stop paying their mortgages, these mortgage-backed securities that it had a bunch of different mortgages in them that were paying these investors an income, mm-hmm. that mortgage-backed security would fail and the investors would stop getting paid. And that would be a huge catastrophic trickle-down effect. It would be a cascading effect because it was so bad. Like the numbers that he showed me were so bad, I didn't believe it. I literally said, that can't be true. Your assumptions cannot be true. It's that bad. That was my reaction.
Yeah.
And so I kept going and doing the same thing. He said, sell everything and go to cash. Those were his words. Sell everything and go to cash. And I was like, why? And he showed me everything that he had. And I was like, you're crazy. Well, sure enough, in 2008, Lehman Brothers collapsed. What he did was he recognized that mortgage-backed securities were in trouble. And he was at a wedding overseas in Europe, in Spain, with a friend. And he was sitting next to the vice president of I think it was the vice president of Lehman. No, it was Merrill Lynch.
Okay.
Merrill Lynch. And he was selling what they called structured products, which were these mortgage-backed securities. They call them structured products because they're just made up. Mm-hmm. They just make up these things and they become assets and they sell them. And so he's learning about these. Yeah, he's learning about these structured products, and he's asking questions that you and I would ask. Like, how is this possible? Like one of the guys says, the guy says that one of the things they're doing is they're selling these structured products, these mortgage-backed securities into the European market, and European banks are buying them up like crazy. They're selling them like hotcakes, were his words. And Kyle knew that they were failing and faltering.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, they're failing right now. And the guy said, I know that. And he goes, but they don't. And he said, and you're still selling them to Europe? And he said, yeah. And they're buying them like hotcakes. And there was no, not even a flash of regret, a flash of, I'm doing the wrong thing. None of that. None of that. And Kyle was sitting there just in total disbelief. And
Yeah.
so he returned home and he started looking at, if these things start failing and investors stop getting payments, what's on the other side of that that would pay off? What's the hedge?
Yeah.
And he discovered these things called credit default swaps, CDSs. And so he recognized they were insurance products. There was an insurance product against the mortgage-backed security in case of default. If it defaulted, the insurance product would pay off the investor so they were whole. They were made whole. But in investment land, if you're a hedge fund manager, you can hedge and bet against the market and you can buy all of those insurance. And so he did that. He raised about $107 million in capital and he bet against mortgage-backed securities by buying credit default swaps, those insurance products. And he waited and he waited and he waited. There's a movie about this called The Big Short that we were talking about.
Yeah.
So he's one of the characters in the movie. And investors started leaving him and investors were getting scared and they were like, you're crazy. This isn't going to happen. And he just kept saying, wait, just wait, just wait, just wait. And sure enough, Lehman Brothers collapsed and everything changed. And now he's considered one of the brightest financial minds of our time. And, you know, when he and I talk, you know, I'll ask him questions. And as soon as he starts talking, I'm like grabbing a pen and paper and taking notes and, you know.
He hears that thing go off on his phone that says you're being recorded.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But he's just brilliant, you know, just a brilliant mind. And he's just so counterintuitive. And that's the biggest lesson here in what we're talking about and with the verse as well, is that you can't follow the herd. And those that follow the herd and just blindly follow conventional wisdom without taking time to stop and pray and ask for guidance and direction for their world and their life, that's when mistakes happen and that's when we lose. That's when the biggest losses occur, you know, is when we
Yeah,
blindly follow the herd. The
it's
herd
true.
mentality is the most dangerous thing in humankind, you
It
know?
is. Especially, I mean, you even think about the biggest example in our lifetime is COVID, right? People who blindly followed the herd into what? Into a
Families.
world of hurt, a
Yep.
world of hurt.
Yep. And now regret it and will for
Yeah.
the rest of their life, you know?
Yeah.
It's just, and so that event and that relationship with him formed my thinking and my whole outlook on just the world, my worldview, my economic outlook, my economic worldview. And I just became completely counterintuitive. And I started thinking, okay, there's got to be something different that he's doing, that the wealthy elite are doing, that we don't know about, right?
Yeah.
And we all know this. We just, in our gut, we know that that's true. We know that there's a different system out there. There's a different process. There's a secret trick, right? That they know, that they're taught, that they keep exclusive to themselves, that we're not taught about.
Yeah.
And I had to find out what that was. And I knew that Kyle was a part of that world, you know, because when your friend is flying back from a closed door meeting with the Senate Finance Committee, getting yelled at by Barney Frank and Harry Dodd, you know, and he's like, they're trying to fund the World Bank at the time. You remember when Greece was collapsing
Yeah.
after the crash and Europe needed a
Absolutely. And then
bailout and it was
this was the whole beginning, the genesis of Sarbanes-Oxley, I believe.
it was. It was. And so what happened was, you know, Greece was defaulting on their debt, and the World Bank had committed $86 billion, which isn't a lot today if you think about it, but back then it was huge. You know, this is 2009, 2010, 11, 12-ish in that, you know, when the market's crashing and everything was depressed and real estate was getting shoved down and nobody knew what was going to happen and Europe starts collapsing, Kyle's intimately involved in these discussions. And so we're trying to fund the World Bank and help out Greece and Europe and fund him with a loan. And so Kyle asked the obvious question. He's like, look, we're in debt. Where are we going to get the money? Where's it going to come from? Right? Simple question.
These are exactly, these are finally the questions that are getting asked on, like in front of the TV instead of just, instead of just behind the closed doors, thankfully.
Yep. Yep. So he's pushing that question and they're ignoring him in this meeting. And Barney Frank at one point turns to him and just says, it's easy. We're just going to increase our exports. Well, if you think about that response, we're just going to increase our exports. At the time, Asia and China were crushing us, just undercutting the cost of everything else. So they were the cheapest at everything. So why wouldn't the world buy everything when it's the cheapest, right? How are you going to compete with that when they have slave labor?
Right.
Like that's the big deal, is the way to control costs is to control labor expense. In America, we pay employees well because we believe that the middle class, having a strong family unit and a strong middle class, is the right thing to do for society, that slavery isn't the right thing to do. China and other countries believe the opposite. They believe that slavery is the way to go. So how do you beat them at that game? You can't. And so he pushes the issue in this meeting, and he gets to the point where he's like, how are we going to beat them? How are we going to do that? How are we going to increase our exports? And he said, Barney Frank slams his fist on the table and he goes, damn it, Kyle, it's simple. We're just going to kill the dollar. And he said the whole room went silent. He said you could have heard a pin drop. Their whole plan was to destroy the dollar, drive it into the ground, to make things cheaper in the United States, to win that export war, that import-export war.
And destroy the American
game
people,
plan.
huh?
That was the plan back in 2012. How do you feel now? How strong is your dollar right now?
Yeah.
You know? And so, Kyle sits on the board of directors for the University of Texas Investment Management Company, UTIMCO, which is their board of directors essentially, and for the university and for all of the University of Texas schools. And it's a $32 billion fund, and he's the fiduciary. He's the one that's managing the money.
Yeah.
And so he comes back from these meetings and he immediately takes $1 billion of that fund and he buys physical gold with it. Like physical gold.
Yeah.
Not the certificates. He's not trading on the...
There's a very nice big depository right there in Dallas, isn't there?
Yes, now there is. Now there is because of Kyle.
Wow.
So my whole worldview, my whole methodology of financial planning and education and everything just was formed during this time frame by just having these conversations with him. And at the time, my world had cratered and I didn't have any money and I'm trying to rebuild things. And all of a sudden, the real estate market collapses. Lehman Brothers collapses, and he's kind of like, I told you so, right?
Gosh.
And what, to make things worse, my wife and I, we get married in 2008. I get married to this wonderful, wonderful woman. And because of my background in diving and, when you're in a small, sport like diving, it's not a revenue generating sport like football or baseball, but it's a small sport. And when you do that, you're coaching everybody a lot. You're coaching each other. You're coaching the younger generation. So I grew up coaching and teaching and training, and I always thought I was going to be a good dad. I really wanted to be a good dad. So I get married to this wonderful woman, Ellen, in 2008, and we get pregnant right away. And we were so excited to have a kid. And we ended up losing our first daughter, Charlie. We had a miscarriage. And it crushed us, just absolutely devastated me personally. I stopped showing up at work. I stopped leading the organization. We started losing money. The real estate market had collapsed. I ended up having to let everybody go. We almost lost our home. Ellen and I started to become more and more disconnected. And one day she was driving around town and she pulled into the parking lot of a church that we had gone to one time before. And she was sitting in the parking lot and she was there just to see if they had a grief counseling group.
Yeah.
And just go in and see if they had anything like that. And she started crying in her car. She started bawling her eyes out. And just randomly, right? Just out of nowhere, her
Mm-hmm.
best friend from high school shows up, Adina, and she hadn't seen her in years. And Adina says, oh my gosh, Ellen, what's going on? What are you doing here? And she tells her what's going on. And Adina says, well, let's reconnect. Let's go to lunch. Let's figure out what to do next. And Ellen comes home and she's all excited. And she says, oh my gosh, she goes, I ran into my best friend from high school, Adina. And she's like, she's starting a new church. Adina was there for a conference for people that were, starting new churches and just
Yeah.
how to get things going logistically. And so, um, God put them together in the right spot, and they reconnected. And Adina said, we're starting this new church, and she said, you should come join us. And so Ellen comes home and tells me, we're going to this new church, this Sunday. And my response is what I told you. I said, didn't you get the memo? God hates us.
Gosh.
I don't
Yeah.
I don't think we're supposed to be doing this. And she didn't know what to do at the time. We were having marital, we were just struggling communicating and
Yeah.
connecting. And so she starts going to this church with Adina, and Adina says, don't worry about it. He'll start coming eventually. Just keep showing up. And sure enough, November comes around, Thanksgiving comes around, and we I had this old beat up truck, had 214,000 miles on it. It was leaking oil. Wheels were wobbly, and it was beat up. And she comes to me and she says, hey, the church is doing this Thanksgiving food drive. We need to borrow your truck. Can we borrow your truck? And I said, listen, it's beat up. It's leaking oil. I don't trust it. Let me drive the truck. But here's the deal. I'm not getting out. I'm not helping. Right. And so we drive out to this new location, this town just outside of Austin called Leander. We pull into Leander Middle School where everybody's putting everything together. And all I see everywhere is children, and they're running around and they're carrying bags of groceries and they're so excited to help other kids that just don't have anything. And I just lost it. And I look up and I just said, okay, I get it. I hop out of my truck. I start helping. And at the time, we didn't have any money. Business was cratering. We were losing our home. We ended up having to sell it in a short sale to avoid a foreclosure, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I just started volunteering at the church, just helping out, just showing up and helping out wherever I could. And of course, the story. Whenever you get out of your own way and stop dwelling in your own problems and start helping other people, that's when God shows up. And so right as soon as I started helping out, everything started shifting. My business started picking up. We started making more money. And we met some friends at church that were getting their foster care license. And they had kids of their own, but they wanted to foster other kids so
Yeah.
that they could help other kids that didn't have anything. And they said, why don't you join us? Maybe that's God's, way to build your family. Maybe that's God's way to grow it. And of course, my response was the same. Didn't you get the memo? God doesn't want us to have kids. And so my wife starts going to these classes, and pretty soon she comes to me and she says, listen, you're going to have to come with me if we're going to get licensed. And eventually you've got to learn this stuff and sign off on everything too. So I start showing up, and it takes about 30 days to get a foster care license. They do an inspection. You have to go through a background check and fingerprints and all that stuff. But it took us about 6 months because I kept digging my heels in. I was resistant. I didn't want to do it. I was scared. But we end up getting licensed, and immediately we get a phone call for two little girls, Chiquita and Sarah, 2 and 4-year-old girls. They were part of a sibling group of 6 kids and 2 adults living in a 1-bedroom apartment complex. The parents were cooking meth, and the police came and took the kids to a group home. The group home didn't have enough beds for the 2 youngest ones, and we got the phone call. That was our first experience. And I knew immediately that that's what we were supposed to be doing. Like it was like God hit me on the side of the head and said, this is what you were meant to do. This is
Yeah.
how we're going to do this. Not your way, my way, you know? And just as soon as we started fostering these kids, we fostered them for about 3 months. They ended up going to Dallas to live with their aunt. We still keep in touch with them today. As soon
Yeah.
as they went to go live with their aunt, we got Caitlin, who is our daughter. Caitlin was rescued from a meth lab in Austin, Texas. The SWAT team came, surrounded the building. It was a extended stay hotel. where meth activity was being reported. SWAT team comes, surrounds the building. They bust down the door. They arrest the mother and the boyfriend. While they're doing their investigation, they hear crying in the bathroom. They open the bathroom door, and Caitlin's in the bathtub, hiding under a blanket, trying to
Oh,
hide from the
goodness.
cops. There's food wrappers on the floor with, half-eaten jars of peanut butter with little finger marks in them, where they were just tossing food in at her. So they take her. We get the phone call. We ended up adopting her. She's 17 now. She's a senior in
Wow.
high school. She's doing great.
Amazing.
She's a beautiful girl. So that's what we just started doing. Next we got Emery. We adopted Emery when she was 1. Emery's now 12. And so we just started growing our family through foster care and focusing on helping these kids to heal from life's hurts. That was our mission and purpose. And so again, once I got out of my way, the money started flowing in. And now I had a tax problem. I had some back taxes that I had to deal with from previous years. And I had this new income that was now taxable to me. And I wanted to use those tax dollars more, positively. I wanted to help kids in foster care. So I call up my buddy Kyle and I start bugging him. I'm like, listen, I know you're doing trusts and I know you have foundations and I know there's things that you're doing and I want to learn. Just can you teach me what you're doing?
Yeah.
And he was kind of like, you gotta make millions of dollars for this to really work and yada, yada, yada. And I just kept hounding him and hounding him and hounding him. Finally, he found an attorney up in Dallas. He said, I'll let you talk to an attorney up in Dallas, a junior attorney that was on his team. And I go up there and he opened the kimono and showed me his business structure and what they do. And it was very simple. It wasn't complicated, but it was so profound. It absolutely blew me away. It came down to 3 secrets. And the first secret is that in America, there are 2 different tax systems. And there's recorded history about this. In 1957, there was a judge on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals named Judge Billings Learned Hand, and he was a tax appellate court judge. And he's famous for this quote. He says, in America, there are 2 tax systems, one for the informed and one for the uninformed, and both are legal. Both are legal. And so what he's talking about is the 1040 tax system and the 1041 tax system. The 1040 is the one that you and I are accustomed to. That's the one that we're taught, trained, and educated on every day.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one where we take the income and we pay tax on whatever we take. And we own the assets and we're taxed on whatever we own, right? Well, the 1041 system is for the wealthy elite. And they all use it, including Congress. So Congress they get salaries of 150 to 175,000.
Yeah.
That salary goes on a 1040 tax return and they pay tax on that and they show America. They say, look, I'm a good tax paying, law abiding citizen. But the rest of the millions that they receive doesn't go to them. It goes into their trusts or their foundations.
Yeah.
Where they don't own the money, they just control the money. And that's secret number 2 that I learned, is that taxes follow title or ownership. And so if you give up ownership of your assets but maintain control, you're no longer taxed on. And so what the wealthy elite do is they take that wealth and give it up to a trust where they don't own it anymore and they're not taxed on it anymore. And they still control the assets of the trust. They just don't own them. And then the third secret that I learned is that if you want to build generational wealth, you first have to learn how to give it all away. And that's where the foundations come into play, the 501c3s. They're nonprofit, private family foundations. They act as an estate planning tool. They act as a charitable way of giving to focus their philanthropic capital. But it's also a way to create generational wealth. When you die, your wealth is transferred to that foundation, which is all tax exempt, and your children take over as trustees, move on down the road. No assets change hands, so there's no estate tax, no probate cost, no wills. It all just goes away.
That's incredible. Sean, before we get into your foundation and kind of the work that you're doing to help people structure their finances this way. I just want to dwell for a second on the fact that you have such an unvarnished view of who you once were. And could you just talk about that for a little bit? Because I feel like
Sure.
the Lord has a very funny and it's a little, it hurts a little bit kind of way to show us ourselves. And I just like to hear about your experience of kind of seeing yourself in the mirror those couple of times and how
Yeah.
you, because you've come to grips with it in such a humorous and self-effacing way.
Well, you kind of have to when you realize how ridiculous you are, how we all are as human beings. You got to kind of laugh at yourself. I mean, I grew up as an elite Olympic athlete, you know, with all the bells and whistles and perks that go with that. They rolled out the red carpet everywhere we went. My bags were carried everywhere we went, you
Wow.
know. I never had to worry about plane tickets. My wife and I laugh about it still because when we went on our honeymoon, I didn't know what to do. She had to instruct me what to do at the airport, you know? It was that ridiculous. So I went from that lifestyle to I I don't know if I told you this. So I was working as a physical therapist and trying to train for the Olympics at the same time, and it just wasn't working. I was working full time, training full time. It was hard. And I went to the owner of the physical therapy clinic that I was working at, and I just said, "Listen, I've got this competition in Russia, and then in Germany, and then it's 2 weeks in Russia, 2 weeks in Germany. We fly back for like a day or two, and then I go back to Germany for another 2 weeks. So it's 6 weeks. I'll be gone. I need to know, am I still going to have a job when I come back?" And his response was, "I can't guarantee that, but good luck to you." You know? And so I remember at that moment, I was treating a knee patient, a guy that was recovering from surgery, and he was an employee at the Home Depot. And Home Depot had a brand new Olympic Job Opportunities program where they would pay you full time with benefits and let you train as much as you wanted to or compete and travel as much as you wanted to. And just whenever you got interviewed, you just mentioned that you were in the Olympic Job Opportunities program with
Wow.
Home Depot, So I did that. I jumped to Home Depot and started working retail and just learning business like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember after the Olympics or after the Olympic trials, I come home and I'm in on my USA sweats and I come running into the store, and Bernie Marcus, the guy who created and started Home Depot, you know,
Mm-hmm.
is there to celebrate me coming
Shut
home from this
up.
big, yeah, swear to God, USA flags everywhere, confetti. I run through, we have a big cake, a big celebration, and then all of a sudden the store owner goes, the store manager, my boss, he goes, "All right, everybody, party's over. We got people to take care of. Let's get back to work." And so we clean everything up. Bernie's there, so we got to make everything look good.
Yeah.
Store's got to look like tip top shape. And so my boss comes up to me, hands me a broom, and he says, "Can you go to the back in the back bays, and sweep up the bays and clean them up?" And I remember coming back from the Olympic trials, being this celebrated athlete, sweeping these floors in the back, just going, looking around, going, "Don't these people know who I am?" You know? And
Yeah.
having this realization all of a sudden that, oh my God, I'm no different than anybody else,
Yeah.
you know? And that hit me like a ton of bricks. That was a big one for me. And so when you
Um,
realize that, the entitlement that you have and
mm-hmm.
just that lifestyle that you pretend to live,
Yeah.
it shocks you. There was that event and then another one that you and I kind of have in common with Coach Kevin, who you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
I was part of an organization. It was a men's business training organization where they had a unique training process. They'd take you out on the beaches with the Navy SEALs and, you know, just beat you up and make you do hard things. You're in
Mm-hmm.
the water with the logs doing sit-ups and doing all the log work and stuff. And I remember finding myself, we were out on the beach one night, this middle of the night, and we were going through this evolution where we had to run to the water, which was freezing cold, jump in the water, come back to um, these fires that they had lit for us. They were burning, they were nice and warm. And then we'd go one by one to the coach, and we had to look him in the eye, and we had to tell him the biggest lie we ever told. So we had to be completely honest and open about the biggest lie we ever told. And of course, when you first try to do that, at least for me, it was difficult. I couldn't get to that lie. Like, I couldn't even uncover the surface lies enough to get to that big one down below. And so I kept going up to Kevin, and I'd say something, and he knew that I was full of it. And so he'd send me back to the water, and I'd come back and I'd try it again, and he'd send me back to the water. And eventually I found myself, I was the last one there. Everybody else was over by the fires. And they were all warm, and I was freezing, shivering. And he looks at me and he's like, in this moment, what do you want? You know, the typical question, the classic question, what do you want? And I didn't know what I wanted. And he's like, what do you want? And I looked at him and I said, all I want to do is be over there with them.
Yeah.
And he said, you'll never be a part of this group as long as you're a liar. And he sent me back to the water. And that was another moment that hit me like a ton of bricks, because my whole life I had believed 100% that I had to produce this facade. I was the Olympic athlete. And in diving, you're scored. You're given a 1 through 10 on your dive, 10 being the best. So everything you do, there's a score. So you've got to be perfect, right? So I always presented this perfection, which I thought was what we were supposed to do.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I realized it's the exact opposite of what is needed and what other people want from us. They want realism. They want authenticity. They want to see that you're not a perfect person. I mean, there was only one, right?
It's true.
Why are you trying to be perfect? Why are you trying to be like Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yep. Yeah. No, I struggle with that myself. Definitely. The facade of perfectionism is something that just trips me up, because I don't know exactly why, but
Yeah.
we
Well,
all
it's
have.
that imposter syndrome. We are
Yeah.
fearful that if
Yeah.
people know the truth about us, they won't accept us. They'll
Yeah.
reject us. And Jesus came and said, no, that's not true.
Yeah.
Your imperfections are why you're loved.
Exactly.
You know, that's why people that's why we connect to other people. We look at people and we say, that person's real. I want to be with that person. I want to connect to that person.
Yeah.
Or that tribe, that group, you know?
Absolutely. So who has that connected you with as you've moved from Mr. Perfect, Mr. Olympic diver into real Sean?
Perfectly imperfect leaders.
Yeah.
Perfectly imperfect leaders. That's who I look for. And so my wife and I, we started Kind Foundation, which is our way of giving back and helping these kids in foster care, and specifically helping the families who we believe are the heroes in this story. You know, they're the leaders in this.
Yeah.
And so they're perfectly imperfect. We're all just trying to help these kids out.
Yeah.
So we started looking for these people. And, fortunate enough, Kyle Bass, my good friend Kyle Bass, invited me over to his house one day, and he was having a party for a guy named Chris Kyle, the American sniper. You remember Chris Kyle?
Yeah.
Chris had just released his book. It had just gone to #1, and Kyle Bass was just having a fun party for him. And so, of course, all of his investors were there, which are, the Cowboys, Jerry Jones and Moose Johnson, and all these Cowboys are there. And Chris Kyle, the sniper's there, and his whole SEAL Team 6, is there.
It's a lot of big dudes.
Yeah, and he's got his guns laid out everywhere. It was really cool. It's super fun. And Taya Kyle was there. She's sitting in the kitchen talking to everybody, and I'm sitting there in a circle talking about diving, of all things, with Kyle Bass. Kyle's talking about diving, and Moose Johnson's there and Chris Kyle's there, and they're asking us about diving, and I'm just like, I don't want to talk about diving. I want to talk about you guys.
Yeah.
But we're sitting there talking about these fun trips that we took to Russia and China and Germany and all these different things, and how it changed. We went there one time when the Iron Curtain was up, and then the next year we went when it was down, and just the differences, and it was really cool. And there was a lull in the conversation, so I'd been thinking about this for a long time, and we'd started this foundation, Kind Foundation, and I turned to Chris and I said, "Man," I want to help military and first responders. And we got this foundation, and we're helping these kids, and we're also helping the parents. I said, what can we do to help you guys out? Like, what is something that's tangible that we can meet you where you're at? Like, what's something we can do right now to help you guys out? And he looked at me and he goes, man, he goes, just serve those who are serving others. And that, again, number 3, hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. And so we changed our whole mission and purpose of what we do at Kind Foundation. Kind Foundation now exists to serve those who are serving other people. So we look for servant leaders.
And
That's
what does
all
that
we
look
do.
like?
That looks like perfectly imperfect leaders. People like, Tim Kennedy. Moving into the election in 2020, it was November 2020. I had never shot a gun before. Things were getting crazy. COVID was coming around and lockdowns were happening and people were just going nuts. And I was like, I turned to my wife and I was like, I at least need to know how to turn a gun on, right? I was like, I at least need to know the basics. So I Google how to shoot a gun, and thank God the FBI didn't show up. And
yeah, you are lucky.
I see Tim Kennedy's company, Sheepdog Response, pops up. And so I buy a ticket and I go to this thing, and it's just a weekend warrior event where they teach you how to shoot guns, and they teach you how to do jujitsu and self-defense and things like that. I didn't know him, had no idea who he was. And I show up and there's some of his friends were there, JP Sears and some other celebrities. Brigham Bueller was there.
JP Sears, that's the hysterical guy, the redhead?
Yeah, the comedian.
Oh my gosh, he's so funny.
I love him. He's coming to our event in December.
Cool.
You got to come to that event.
Okay.
I'll send you the link. So anyway, we're having a good time and learning a ton. At the beginning, I couldn't even shoot the target. And by the end of the weekend, I'm like, we're rolling in the dirt, shooting under vehicles, and we're moving and shooting at the same time, and just becoming really, really good at this skill set. And I thought, man, I love this guy. I love this team. They were authentic. They were real. They were elite, the best of the best. And they were still had plenty of space to give each other crap and joke around and make fun of each other, And it was so attractive. I was like, man, I love these guys. Again, no idea who he was, no idea what I was supposed to be doing. And I'm driving out to the gun range on the last day of this class. And now I'm on his email list. And so I get an email about a school that Tim was starting called Apogee, this school. And Apogee was a unique design. They were taking the kids out of the classroom, putting them out into nature, doing hard things. And when they were doing hard things, they were learning lessons. And those lessons stick. When you have a challenge and you fail and you break through that failure, you learn at an accelerated rate. And what happens is you end up collapsing time and leapfrogging over all of the obstacles that you see in the educational process. And so kids are learning at an accelerated rate. And more importantly, they're getting in touch with outside nature, away from devices. They're relaxing their lizard brain. Yeah. They're engaging their frontal lobe, right? They're connecting with each other. Now, simultaneously, my daughter, Caitlin, was not connecting at school. And so we had pulled her out of school. She was 13 at the time, struggling, as most kids were, from foster care, very traumatic background, right? Just horrible background. So that trauma in those kids creates a lot of disconnection and just dysregulation in general. So sitting in a classroom for 8 hours a day is tough, We had her in Asheville, North Carolina, out into this wilderness camp called Trails. Trails stands for trust, respect, accountability, integrity, leadership, and service. They take the kids in the mountains, make them do hard things in these modules, and they learn by doing hard things and having breakthroughs. When they come off the mountain, it rewires their brain. They're totally different kids. Now,
there's something really important about knowing that you can do something hard.
There is. What happens is, and this is something that we learned in the foster care system. One thing that my wife and I really started diving into was brain chemistry and brain trauma. And what we learned and realized was that these kids in foster care that have struggled with trauma and that are disconnected or dysregulated, what's going on in their brain is that they have a hyperactive lizard brain, constant fight or flight response.
Yeah.
They walk into a room and they are just scanning the room for threats. Soldiers and first responders are the same.
Yeah.
hyperactive lizard brain. Their frontal lobe shuts down, which is responsible for thought processing, relationships, connection, all that good stuff. And so over time, when you're in a traumatic situation or in a situation where you're hyper vigilant all the time, your brain develops that way. And so you have to reverse that. Luckily, the brain is pliable, it's malleable, so you can change it. It just takes time. And the way to change that and to transform and rewire the brain is through connection with people and doing hard things. Jiu-jitsu and connection with others, right?
Yeah,
Which
tactile.
is what Tim Kennedy does. So again, driving out to the gun range, I'm reading about apogee, which is all about connection with others and doing hard things and rewiring the brain. And in doing that, learning at an accelerated rate because you're in the right environment and your brain's processing faster. And I run out to this, gun range, and Tim's standing there, this big UFC fighter, and he's got a gun on his hip. And I go running up to him and I hit him on the back. And I go, Tim, I know why I'm here. And he whips around. He whips around and he grabs his gun and he's like, why? And I'm like, no. I'm supposed to help you with Apogee Schools. And he looks at me and he's like, how come? And I tell him about our foundation. I tell him what we've been doing with our daughter, Caitlin. I said, look, I'm not sending her back to public schools when she gets out. I'm 100% convinced this is the future of education. And I know, because I know Kevin Wazane, Coach Kevin, I know exactly what we need to do for this trajectory, for this school system. We need to have a young men's group. We need to have a young women's group. We need to have a men's group. We need to have a women's group. We need to have campuses. We need to have a foundation. So that's where I come in. We need to have a scholarship for military and first responder kids so they can go to your school. His eyes got this big and he was like, I've always wanted to do that. I said, I can do that for you. And he stopped and he looked at me and he goes, crap, we're going to have to go to lunch, aren't we? And I said, yes, we are. And so a week later, we went to coffee and, we spent about an hour and a half together mapping everything out. He showed up and he was in all fatigues. He was going out to Camp Swift to go train. And he gives me a hug and he slams his cell phone down and he goes, okay, buddy, I've got 8 minutes. Tell me everything I need to know.
8 minutes.
One of those meetings where you're just like, you get
Where
one
do you
shot.
even start?
Yeah, you get one shot with this guy to kind of map out this idea that you have, and you got 8 minutes to do it. Well, an hour and a half later, we were still talking. And his cell phone was spinning in a circle and buzzing, and people were trying to get in touch with him. And we had kind of mapped out exactly what we have in Apogee today. Today in Apogee, fast forward 5 years later, we have 150 campuses nationwide. We have one campus in Canada, one in Australia. So we're global. We have a foundation. We have our very first gala event coming up December 5th. If you go to legendsforleaders.org, legendsforleaders.org,
Put this up.
legendsforleaders.org is our landing page for that event, for the fundraiser. And we are currently selling tickets to the event. We have a lot of Tim's friends that are going to be there that have already committed to coming. So there are going to be a ton of celebrities there. You're not going to want to miss it. It's going to be super fun. It's a giant auction. And we've got a lot of his friends and celebrities giving some items to auction off. So there are going to be some really cool stuff. Things like hunting trips, what is it called? It's range to table events, like where you can go on a hunting trip and prepare the food and bring it to table and eat it and have a delicious meal and that whole experience. Cool. We have an African safari we're auctioning off. We have David Garibaldi, who's a famous painter, will be painting 3 pieces that night. And he's the one that opens for Kiss, where he paints those paintings upside down and then he flips them upside down and it looks really cool.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Yeah. So he'll be there. He's going to be doing three works. We're doing a Charlie Kirk tribute. Charlie was a mentor in Apogee. So when I got involved with Tim 5 years ago, he didn't know me at all. And so at first, he just wanted to get to know me. So we started building this relationship. I started doing jujitsu with him. And I was leaving the jujitsu gym one day and I came around the corner. He was sitting in his truck and I hop into his truck And I'm like, hey, what you doing? Just to be a pain in the butt.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got this serious face on, and he's looking at his phone and he goes, I've got to go away for a while. And it was the Afghanistan withdrawal. And he said, he looked at me and I said, what do you need from me? What can I do while you're gone? How can I help? And he said, I need you to call Matt Boudreau, my business partner in Apogee. I really think that what we've been talking about, I think this has legs and I want this to work. So can you call him up and tell him everything we've been talking about? And so Tim went to go save 18,000 people. And I called up Matt Boudreau and we just started mapping out what Apogee could look like. And a few months later, about a year later, I brought in Coach Kevin because I knew what he could bring to the table. He had built out this software platform for his company, and I thought it was a perfect fit for where we were headed. It had a whole tracking program where you could basically gamify your whole life.
Yeah.
And what we do in Apogee, which is unique, is these kids go through a whole educational journey. The word apogee is a military term. It means the farthest distance you can go, or the zenith or the peak of your destination. And
Wow.
so if you
Cool.
think about education, where's the apogee point for education? It's like it should be ongoing.
Yeah.
And so what we've done is we created a whole journey of education for kids as early as ages 4 all the way through adults. And we focus on 4 pillars of life. We focus on your faith, family, fitness, and future. Your faith, what is your connection to God or your reason for being here, your purpose in life,
Yeah.
right? And are you following that purpose? Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing right now? What does your family life look like? What do your relationships look like? The people that are most important to you, your
Yeah.
spouses, your children, those relationships. Are you fostering those relationships and growing them, connecting with others? Fitness, mental and physical fitness. What are you doing every day to build yourself up, to weaponize your body physically, weaponize your mind spiritually, And then lastly is future. So education for the kids is their future. Finances for parents is their future. And so that's where I come in. And so I talk about legacy a lot. And so the mission and purpose of Apogee, whole mission and purpose of Apogee Strong, is to reseed freedom and sovereignty by disrupting education for the whole family. So we're
That.
changing our country, but we're doing it through education, by disrupting education. And it's a very simple philosophy. We're bringing old school educational processes back into the home. So
It's
all of
amazing.
these homeschool parents that are tired of the system, that are correct, that are
Yeah.
right, that need to disconnect from the system. It's not the educators. The educators are great. They're just stuck in this system. We analyze the system of education and we look at the money flow, which is what I look at. 95% of the money in education goes to administration. It doesn't go to the educators. What if you could remove the administrative layer of fat from education and give that money to the educators? Like, what if we could take it to the next level? What if we could show you as an educator how to create a campus and crush it and become a business owner and make millions by educating others?
We would have a whole different country.
Let me give you an example. I have a client right now. He's 32 years old. I met him when he was 28. He sells things on Amazon. He's an Amazon guy. Now he's gotten really good at it. He's figured out the algorithm.
Yeah.
And so he constantly gets his stuff ranked at the top. Okay. That's not how he's made his millions. He made his millions when he created a course, an online course, teaching other people how to beat the algorithm in Amazon. What he did was he created this 6-module, 6-video course.
Mm-hmm.
He priced it at $997, right? The magic number at the time. He sold 1,000 copies in 52 days. He became a millionaire in 52 days.
Wow.
Today, all he does is sells educational content around Amazon sales. It's educational content.
Mm-hmm.
He makes $30 million a year
Holy
consistently
smokes.
through education. So Apogee, our mission and purpose is twofold. Number one is to disrupt education so that we can bring back critical thinking and a different methodology of learning things by learning by doing, failing over and over and breaking through and having those breakthroughs and learning at an accelerated rate. We have students right now, leaders, we call them young leaders. We have young leaders right now that are 16, 17 years old that just got their masters and PhDs. Why? Because nobody told them they couldn't do it.
Wow.
Nobody said you got to stop. They just
Sean,
kept going.
because of the tactile nature, are y'all going to be doing anything, or are you doing anything with the trades?
We are, yes. So that's a great question. So we have a partnership with an organization that does online university, accredited university level licensing or degree programs.
Okay.
Things like nursing, electricians,
Mm-hmm.
where it requires a license,
Yeah.
but the methodology is the same. And here's where we're different. We believe that everybody's educational journey is different. That there's not a one size fits all journey for everybody.
Yeah.
So we call that a conveyor belt style educational system. And
Yeah.
that's what we have today. And we think that's wrong. So we're breaking that system. Everybody that goes through even a degree program or a licensing program as a licensed plumber or electrician, you want that license at the end to go practice that trade. The process is different. First step is you get a mentor. You get an expert in the field to guide you and teach you and coach you and train you along the way. Second thing is you're doing real world experience. So you're an apprentice.
Yeah.
You're working and failing every single day and learning from those failures. And the mentor is right there with you, coaching, teaching, and training you. And so by the time these kids finish their degree and get that degree or that license, that bachelor degree or that license, they have a portfolio of work that they can take to an employer.
Yeah. And they're actually good at the job already.
Not just a degree.
Yeah.
So it's a totally different methodology in thought process in education. We're
Amazing.
trying to say, the way that they used to educate families back in the olden days, where you would go out into the field with your father,
Right.
and you would learn the skill set or learn the trade or learn whatever it was with that mentor side by side, learning by doing, mastering it. We're bringing that back.
Amazing.
And what we're doing is we're saying the kids can choose whatever it is they want to master. So you're not stuck as, my dad was a doctor, I got to be a doctor.
Yeah. You know what's amazing is that the Lord's talked to me over the last 4 or 5 years about there being a return to the ancient path. And of course, I just thought that was spiritual. I thought it was spiritual. I thought it was also about the foundational principles of our country, everything surrounding what it means to be free. But there has to be something in this as well, because our educational system is so broken, and returning to the way of learning that will actually teach us something and make us have true ownership and just
Sovereignty.
sovereignty, confidence in our own ability to do something is so important. And so it's a beautiful thing to see that Apogee is a return to the ancient path. It's a return to the way that we were meant to learn, that we were designed to learn.
I think it is biblical. And I write about this in my book.
I do
I
have
don't know
it.
if do you have my book?
Yeah.
So the truth about taxes, how the wealthy elite play a different game. It's everything that we just talked about, my whole journey, the whole story, but with a breakdown in what I'm actually doing from a practical application standpoint with the trust and foundation stuff. So highly recommend it. It's a good read. It's not about taxes, I promise.
And I do want you to come back on, Sean, sometime soon and just talk to us about how to think about finances, how to think about generational wealth, how to decouple ourselves from this herd mentality. What you see on the ticker, what you see on MSNBC, what you see on Yahoo News is trying to influence you to do the thing that they want you to do so that they can short sell you. Of course, we know this if we can kind of unplug from the system, but being able to read those signs and starting to understand how to think for ourselves, how to hear from the Lord on finances, I think is a hugely under thought about thing. So I want you to come back on and talk to us about that.
Yeah, I'd love to, and I do address some of that in my book. I talk about the biblical nature of things, how right now everything is so centrally planned and centrally controlled. And, throughout history, this has happened,
Yeah.
is that you have this consolidation into a central government, central bank, central educational system, central healthcare system. And that central control and central planning becomes so burdensome that the society just becomes so big, it just collapses in on itself.
Yeah.
And everything goes back to small groups, which is biblical.
Yeah.
That's how we operate best, in small, tight-knit groups that are starting to work with each other,
Yeah.
you know? And I know everybody hates that word.
Decentralization.
Yes, it's decentralization. Everybody calls it tribalism. And they say tribalism is a bad word. Tribalism is not a bad word. It means small groups. That's it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So that's where we're headed. And I think we're headed there with education. I think we're headed there with healthcare. I think we're headed there with finances, breaking things up. Right now, we're working on, with the Department of Education, trying to return the federal education dollars back to the states.
Yeah.
So that people can use your own tax dollars to follow your educational journey. And what we're lobbying for, if you want to call it that, we're not a lobby, right? But what we're hoping for and what we're trying to really talk about up in DC with people is that, if I'm a grandparent and I don't have any skin in the game, why can't I use my tax dollars to fund my grandchild's education as a
Yeah.
scholarship?
Yeah.
Or if I'm a homeschool parent, why can't I use my tax dollars to fund the homeschool programs and expenses?
Absolutely. And then I think there's another piece to it too, which I think you would agree with, which is if you are a retired person with a skill set, why can you not teach that skill set to people? Just because you don't have some state sanctioned certificate, that means absolutely nothing.
So we're breaking that whole paradigm with the mentor-mentee relationship. You know, kids are becoming experts, top of their field, learning skill sets faster than other kids that are going through college courses,
Yeah.
because they have that mentorship.
Yeah.
And
And
what's cool is we're paying the mentor. The mentors are making money. They're able to charge
yeah.
a good fee for it.
That's amazing. And I it's so needed. I mean, when I left college, I just thought I need to learn next from someone who's actually done something, because so far, my entire journey, none of these people have actually done any of the things that they have been teaching me about, especially college, right? Because, you're building the foundations in
Yeah.
in primary school. But it was just so irritating to me to be taught things by people who had only lived in the theoretical world. And
Well,
so,
again, it goes back to what the Bible says. By their fruit you shall know them. Results
yeah,
are all that matters.
that's
And
right.
so
That's
when
so
you see
good.
somebody preaching something and they're not doing it, there's a
Yeah.
disconnect there.
Yeah.
That's another thing that we teach in Apogee, is that with anything in life, you have to go through this journey. You have to first learn it, then you have to live it before you lead it. Learn it, live it, then lead it. It's not the other way around. You can't learn it, then lead it. You become a false prophet.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have to live what you're preaching. And if that's something I'm very sensitive about, because especially in financial services, their financial advisors are a dime a dozen these days.
Yeah.
But I promise you, if you ask them, hey, are you doing what you're telling me to do? 90% of them are not. They're just not. So why would you listen to anybody that's not doing what they're telling you to do?
Yeah.
And that goes for anything. That goes for
It's true.
healthcare. You go to a doctor. I think I might have told you this. Sorry, we're getting sidetracked, but I went to a doctor. I had surgery on my spine. I was doing jujitsu and my back was hurting. And I go to get an MRI, and it turns out there's a giant cyst on my spine wrapped
Dear.
around my spinal column inside my vertebrae. Okay.
Dear.
So I go to the doctor, the surgeon, and he looks at the MRI. And this guy is probably my age. I'm 55. and he looks like he's 90 or 80.
Mm-hmm.
He's out of shape. He's just, doesn't look like he works out at all. And he looks at the MRI and he says, this is bad. The best we can do is probably fuse L4 and L5 and hope for the best. Now, I'm doing jujitsu with Tim Kennedy at this point, right? Like I'm a blue belt. I'm not the greatest, but I'm getting there, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and I love it. And I'm sitting there thinking, how do I get back on the mats? And this guy's telling me he's going to have to fuse my spine. But I'm looking at him and I'm just like taking his word with a grain of salt. I leave
Yeah.
that meeting. I was all depressed. I was talking to Tim about it. I was like, what am I going to do? And finally, he's like, you got to get a second opinion. So I do that. I go to get a second opinion. The second guy is the #1 spinal surgeon in all of Texas. I go in to see him. Same thing. He's my age, but he looks like he's 30. He's a mountain bike rider. He rolls up his sleeves and he's got bruises on his arms. And he's like, I get it, man. He's like, I was on the trails the other day. He goes, I cracked a rib. I'm all bruised and beat up. And all I can think about is getting back out there. We found another
Yeah.
trail and I want to go tackle it.
Amazing. Yeah.
He's like, the biggest challenge is after this surgery, the biggest challenge for you is not getting back into it too quick, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like night and day. And I'm sitting there looking at the two guys and the results, just the results. Who do you think I want to choose?
Exactly.
We need to do that with everything in our lives. We can't sit there and go to college and trust these professors. They don't live what they're preaching,
It's
you
true.
know?
And you can see the limited mindset versus everything is possible. Everything is able to be healed in this case, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just a very stark contrast because you can, anyway, I won't go there. But
There's a
Sean,
lot of lessons in that,
there is
you
so
know?
many lessons in that. Absolutely.
And that's what we
It,
try and do at Apogee. It's like if we have real life, real world experiences, and real people that are actually really doing things that can show real world results, how fast can we learn?
I love that. I love that.
And where's the apogee point? Where's the end point at that point? It's never
Yeah.
ending.
You don't want one.
No.
Awesome. Well, it has been an absolute joy to talk to you today. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your very busy schedule. I love what you're doing with the foundation. Obviously, love what you're doing with Apogee, and I'm very captivated by what you're doing in the financial services arena. We'll get you back to come and talk about that as well. Do you have any final words for people? Any words of advice too from the conversation that we've just had? I think people may be
Yes.
looking for purpose, looking for identity, looking for legacy, all of those things.
Yes, the one thing I will say is if you're a business owner or an entrepreneur or an investor and you're trying to figure things out and you're having that challenge where you're stuck in that scarcity mindset and sometimes you get to abundance and you cycle back to scarcity and it's just this wild loop and you're
Yeah,
having a hard time stabilizing abundance, the secret, the key is you're still focused on yourself and making your own money. If you can shift that mindset, get out of your own way and focus on how do I serve others at the highest possible level? If you can do that and really pour your heart and soul into that and just focus on that every day. When I get up in the morning and my feet hit the ground, I am so fired up because I know that my mission and purpose is to go out and serve other people. I don't care about the money. The money just comes in. You know, it's
that's
not my
amazing.
money anyway. It's
That's
not
right.
going to me anyway. It's going to the foundation. It's going to other things. You know, I'm just the manager. I'm just the steward. If you can flip that mindset that we don't own anything, we are just the stewards of what we've been blessed with, then I can show you how to put that into practice. And
That's
when you do
amazing.
that, you get to keep everything.
Yeah, that is so biblical. We need to have a
It
whole
really is.
conversation just on that.
If you take the position that your life is not your own, that
Yeah,
you're here as an instrument and your job is to produce as much as possible. That's the key. Just because you're serving doesn't mean you can't produce at the highest level. God calls us to produce, just not for us.
yeah,
It's for others,
awesome.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Give me some links that we'll put them all in the show notes, but you have links for all the work you're doing.
Yeah, so the truthaboutaxes.org is a great starting place that has a small, brief documentary that is a kind of a high-level overview of what we talked about and a link to get the book.
All right.
The truthaboutaxes.org. And then apogeestrong.com is where you can learn more about the Apogee network of campuses and the men's and women's groups. We have 3,000 families that are now part of the Apogee family, the Apogee network. 150 campuses nationwide and growing. And then legendsforleaders.org is our December 5th event. We would love to see everybody there. Unfortunately, it's at a bougie ranch, and so there's limited seating. So if you cannot make it, please make a donation and just let us know, a little bit about, there's a space in there where you can give an encouraging word. And if you can choose a scripture, we would love to post that up on the board. We're going to have revolving scriptures up there.
Awesome.
We're doing a huge Charlie Kirk memorial thing, and David Garibaldi's going to do a painting of him, and we're going to be auctioning it off. So he was a great mentor for the young men.
I know he must have been. Yeah,
he
absolutely.
Taught them all about, conflict resolution and logical fallacies and all that cool stuff.
Yeah.
So that's what you get when you get into Apogee. You get that level of mentorship.
Incredible. And then your foundation.
So my foundation is Kind Foundation, and it's just kindfoundation.us. And we are just constantly trying to look for good servant leaders so we can support them.
Awesome. That's so beautiful. Well, Sean, thank you again for your time. God bless you. And I look forward to staying in touch. You will be getting an email from me about how you can be my mentor.
Perfect. Yes, we got to get going on your stuff.
Yeah. Awesome. Sure. Awesome. So, well, thank you
thanks
again.
for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
You are so welcome. Thanks for taking some time with me. And again, thank you for being flexible with the dates. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you. All right. And then Chris and I will be back tomorrow on the State of Freedom. We will have Paul Hurd with us, constitutional attorney who is part of the legal team that is right now, I think, arguing in front of the Supreme Court on the racial gerrymandering case in Louisiana. So you won't want to miss that. I think Paul is going to have some great unvarnished remarks for us. His insights are bar none. So thank you for joining me today. Thank you for taking some time with Sean. Isn't he incredible? And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow back here, same time, 10 a.m. Central on the State of Freedom. The secret to losing weight 2 times faster has gone viral. See the transformations hundreds of thousands of men, women, and teens are experiencing around the world with the Slender Eyes drops. These homeopathic hormone-balancing drops are proven to control appetite, support thyroid function, improve energy, boost mood, and increase metabolic rate. To learn more about the drops or other incredible natural wellness and lifestyle products, email me at danielle@freedomstate.us or visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. If you're looking to invest in physical precious metals or convert your 401k to a precious metals-backed IRA, please consider making your investment with our trusted partner, Metal Stacks. Their prices regularly beat the big sites, and they have no credit card fees or minimums. Shipping is free for orders over $500. Just visit metalstacks.com/dwalker or get there from our website, freedomstate.us. If you're interested in the IRA conversion, drop me a message at danielle@freedomstate.us and I can get you connected with their white glove service. Thanks for joining me today on For the Love of Freedom. It is an honor and a true privilege to get to spend some time with you. If you're looking for other episodes of this show, you can find them on all of the State of Freedom platforms. And a reminder that this show is live on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Central. God bless.